What is mindset? Our mindset is based on what we believe, and anything we believe in, we put into motion. I have spent my life putting the mindset of perseverance into motion, and now I am here today to share my journey along with others whose mindsets have changed the course of their lives. Hi, I'm Mindset Coach Lorraine Lindsey, and I believe that if you can change your mind, you have the power to change your life. So are you ready? Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Mindsetters, where we believe that if you can change your mind, you have the power to change your life. We are in season 2 of the Mindsetters, and we're happy to be talking about things that are very specific to just that, changing your mind. Before we get into the introduction of today's show, please do not forget that we are also on YouTube. So if you are liking what you're listening to, please subscribe to us. Send us your comments. We want to hear from you. Give us a thumbs up. Let us know that you are out there and listening. I am your host, Coach Lorraine Lindsey. I am a certified life coach, peak performance coach, and a mindset coach. And today we are going to be talking about the mindset specifically on success. We are tapping into the series on how people have rags to riches stories, how they've gotten to their levels of success, or how they're looking to move forward in their success. We did a whole series on relationships and love, and now we want to talk about the mindset on wealth because there is a mindset related to that. And so this is the first time on this show that we are starting to discuss success. And so I couldn't think of a better person to have than my guest on the show. And today, the question that we're going to answer is, what do I choose now in the second half of my life? And this is a great topic, even for myself, where I am looking to transition in careers and having, 2 or 3 careers behind my belt and, always looking, can I start over? Can I do something different? And what if I just don't want to do anything at all? So let me introduce my guest. And you know what? I've never asked you because about your last name.
Rasmussen.
Okay, Rasmussen. Okay, so I was right. I was
That's
right. So we have this guest. He's a very special guest, Mr. Mike Rasmussen. He's a co-founder and co-business owner of Signature Realty, amongst other businesses he has. He is also a life coach and a consultant. And I want to just give a little background on him, although it's a lofty one because you've had a lot of lives, Mike, a lot of lives. So just a little introduction on Mike. He was actually born and raised in Minnesota in a lower middle class family. When he was 9 years old, his dad was diagnosed with the same kidney disorder that killed his grandfather. By the time he was 11 years old, his parents had divorced. And at 13, he actually moved out and got his first full-time job. He was someone, and we're going to talk about this in great detail too, but you were always a great athlete in school. You played hockey, football, you wrestled. How do you say it again?
Slalom
water skiing, which I just learned that word today. Downhill skiing. He had his ups and downs with grades, and initially you would blame it on your sports activity. But you realized later that you had 161 IQ and a learning disability with ADD and dyslexia.
Right.
You joined the Army at 18 as an M1AI tanker, rising to a tank commander, and you spent a couple years in Germany. Then and you're also a Gulf War vet.
Yep.
You later served as the National Guard Reserves in Airborne.
Yep.
Wow. You went to college. You went to a couple different universities. You spent lots of times in the restaurant industry, eventually owning part of a cafe. You also became a police officer for 6 years, spending most of your career on Violent Crime and Narcotics Task Force as the designated undercover officer.
Yep.
You retired early due to injuries in the line of duty. You obviously have been an entrepreneur. You said you've been an entrepreneur since you were a little kid. Your first house you ever owned was a duplex, and you renovated and did the house hack thing.
Yep.
That grew your interest into decent flipping and real estate investment business. After the police force, you became a contractor, settling union disputes and strikes. And you also got your real estate license quickly, becoming the owner of a broker and a small real estate and mortgage company. You sold that and another business for a profit. You then later became a franchisee and eventually a regional owner for a large real estate brand. You moved to Alaska, which you reside there most of the time. I opened up a brokerage and a couple of other companies, as well as a career in business coaching and investing. 8 years ago, you became the co-founder and brand headquartered in Las Vegas, which is Signature, right?
Right.
And you've sold other companies in Alaska. You are a proud father of 3 children. You have a 15-year-old son, a 17-year-old daughter, and a 30-year-old son. You are currently a coach, a broker, and an options trainer. And with all that, deep breath, you are still trying to figure out what's next.
Yes.
Welcome, Mike Rasmussen.
Rasmussen.
It's
all right.
I'm terrible. Forgive me, Mike.
Everybody pronounces it that way.
So first and foremost, how are you?
I'm great. Good
Yeah.
to see you again.
I know you are super, super busy, so I'm incredibly honored that you're here to take the time to speak with me. And I wanted to share a little bit about my first impression of you when I very first met you.
Okay.
I met you a few years ago. It's been several years now, actually.
Yeah.
It was at a holiday party for Signature Realty, and I was with actually one of the co-hosts on the show, Carmen. And I remember you walked into the room, and we were sitting in the very back of the place. And you walked in, and you were wearing this blazer and denim jeans and some really cool cowboy boots.
I still have all those boots.
And everyone's
take the cowboy.
Everyone's all fancy and all that, and their holiday get-ups, and of course you looked very handsome. You were very well dressed, but you just had this kind of presence about you when you walked in. And what I observed, because I'm very observant in a room, especially when there's a room full of successful people, entrepreneurs, realtors, etc. As I noticed when you walked in, you were very friendly and cordial, and you made it a point to stop and speak with myself and my friend. But when you walked through the entire room, everybody made it a point to say something to you. And I remember saying to Carmen, "Who is he?" And she's like, "Well, I'm not really sure." And I said, "Well, you need to know who he is." Because he's kind of a big deal. I said there's something about him, and he takes his time to talk to everybody, but everybody's almost waiting to speak to him. So that was actually my first impression of you. And so here we are years later.
Here we are.
As much as you had that presence to yourself, you've always been very cool and very humble, actually.
And now you're that person, right?
No, I'm not that person. Not yet. I'm working on it, Mike. I'm working on it.
You're close.
So I kind of want to dissect this amazing bio of your life, and I know that's just a fraction. But I want you to take us on this journey, because today we're answering that question of, what's next?
Right.
And for someone who has been and done so many of these things, wanting to know why, the question as to why you're asking yourself, well, what's next?
Right.
So a little bit about your childhood, if you don't mind. You said you were 13 years old when you moved out and got your first full-time job.
Like lots of people, right? Especially that time of history, is when, I hate to say it, the 80s were when everybody became a single parent. You know what I mean? It was like the era of all divorces started then, it seems like. And unfortunately haven't stopped, right? But we went through a period of time, my family, where all of a sudden my family was hitting the American dream. We went from nothing to having this really nice house, the whole thing out in the suburbs. Actually, we're out in the woods, but it was a suburb area of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And next thing I know, my dad was sick. Here's the perfect family. Dad was sick with the same disease his sister had, and his father had passed away from years earlier. And then my aunt died from it, and then he was waiting on a kidney transplant, and things like that quite often tear couples apart. Right? Illness has a devastating effect on relationships, unfortunately, and kidney diseases, especially for people that actually are lucky enough to get transplants, it's one of the most ruthless diseases upon a family, because for 2 years, it's like living with the worst drug addict on earth, because your kidneys are actually poisoning your body. Then all of a sudden the next day they have something that cleans their system out, and they want the world to go back to how it was before they got sick. Not everybody around them can.
Interesting.
And so that's kind of what happened to my family. And the next thing we know, we went from having this big successful life to not. Now my mom, bless her heart, she did a fantastic job. Dad was in the picture, but he was struggling with, learning to get back into life. You know what I mean? Some drug issues, all that kind of stuff that comes along with dealing with those things. And I was put into a position where I think at, 11 or 12, like lots of kids are, unfortunately, you become the the adult.
Were you the oldest?
I was the oldest.
Okay.
I had a younger sister at the time. Mom was very dependent upon me. It felt weird. You know what I mean? You feel all of a sudden you're 12 years old and you're like acting like you're the dad.
Right.
And literally acting like it felt like at times. And there came a time where, you know, I wanted some shoes and I wanted some clothes, and it was like, okay, go get a job. Well, nobody's going to hire a 13-year-old kid.
Right.
And I looked much bigger and older than I was. And through some connections that my mom had, the next thing I know, I was working out at this horse ranch with all these rich people who boarded these horses called saddlebreds. That's the cowboy in me. You always making fun of my cowboy boots. That's where it started,
I like your
right?
cowboy boots.
And next thing I know, I was working out at this ranch illegally because they originally thought I was 17. They found out I wasn't old enough to work, and then they cut my pay in half, kept it, and still kept me on.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was the old child labor laws actually happened, right? But for me, it was the world. I needed a place to stay, you know, lived
So
in this.
you actually had left home.
Oh yeah, I lived out on the ranch. Yeah, I'd come home on Saturday nights and go back on Sunday nights.
Wow.
Yeah. And you know, did that until I was legally old enough to work, and started working in restaurants after that, you know. But I moved away for almost a year. So
Wow. So, okay. So I'm going through your bio, and you said that that's your full-time job.
Yep.
Where did you find the time? Because then you were actually an athlete. You participated in a lot of sports and things like that.
I was actually having this conversation the other day with my youngest, because he's the typical gamer kid of today, right? You know, he wants to sit on the couch and play. And with COVID, you know, he's in heaven because now gets to stay home no matter what. He takes all his classes online. He does the homeschooling thing. Now, he's very dyslexic also. I gave him, unfortunately, a lot of my traits. Brilliant kid, like lots of those kids are, but traditional school is not easy for him. And so, you know, finding classes online that work for him, but he just sails right through it. Then he spends the rest of the day gaming and sitting on the couch. It's like, all right, you're 16, time to go get a job or do a sport. Let's go. Right. That's
But that's hard when daddy's super successful.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but that's always been the rule in the house. His mom had the same rule, right?
That's
it was,
good,
you know, something's going to take up your time.
Right.
Right. And then I started telling him what did you do at 16?
He's like, do you really want to know?
You really want to know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I played multiple sports, right? I worked a full-time job the entire time I was in high school. When I say full-time, I mean I worked 50 hours a week, and I played sports, and I slept a couple hours a night and still went to school, still did the whole thing. And I know that's not normal, and I would never do that to one of my children today, but it's what made me who I am today. And it's probably why I'm, you know, in my early 50s, and I'm
and have the level of success that you've had.
Right. And I'm truly also looking back going, okay, now what's next? I really feel like I'm in that second half of my life.
That's why, and this is the journey I want to take everybody on, because all of that plays a role that's significant to how you've gotten to that, you asking that question of yourself today.
Right.
So at some point you realize, we had said off air, you know, you were like, my grades were either great or they were really bad.
Right.
And you attributed it at times to you know, I'm so distracted by, you know, me being an athlete, but yet you find out I have this IQ of 161, but I
so
also
it's not my IQ. I mean, I'm considered, was at the time, like, I have no idea, but supposedly that's really, really smart. Right.
But then you have these
but they
learning
didn't
disabilities.
diagnose ADD and dyslexia back then. I mean, you're just a lazy kid. You know, I mean, that was the way they looked at it. You're not trying hard enough. Well, but it's kind of like when you asked me to write the bio, right? Asking me to write a bio would be like asking somebody to go write a thesis paper this weekend, right? The pressure that you instantly put on me was like, shit.
You mean I put some pressure on you?
Yes, you did.
Oh, you poor thing.
No, but you know what I'm getting at. It for people that have ADD.
No, but I understand. Yeah.
Right. And so, but there's other awesome things that come with it, right? You learn to have other traits that come along that make you very successful or can make you successful.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because you had mentioned that also too off air. Because, and again, this is going to go to the mindset, right? Because a lot of times, or often for people, is that they will say, I can't be successful because of this, because of that. So what was the shift for you or was it something you kind of knew innately, or was it just kind of like touch and go? You just went along the way. But when did you realize that, listen, I'm not going to let this be the thing that hinders me. I'm going to let it be something that I'm going to use as my advantage.
So you're a lifestyles coach, life coach in business, and you talk to people all the time about designing the life they want. That's one of the things I do too, and we talk about that, right? Honestly, for me, it was more about just thinking it through and then trying to act on it the best you could. I would like to say that I had some grand scheme plan. No, I bumbled through it like most people do, right? Looking back,
But the key is you tried
right,
it. You
but
made the attempts.
up until the last couple of years, I was, yeah, I had this grand plan and went through it. Now I'm like, no, bullshit. It's fail every freaking day, learn something every day, cry every day, laugh every day, and get up and move on. Keep going. Just keep. I'm more for sports fans. I was a fullback in football.
Okay.
Okay, that's the overachieving dude on the team that when they say run through that wall, right? Who's a little too much muscle, a little too much speed, but not the perfect athlete on the team, but a better athlete than almost anybody else on the team. You just don't fit, right? But you do the dirty work of all dirty work is the fullback on most, and especially in the past. And that was what I played in football. Of course, I'd gravitate towards that spot because that's the way I've run life, right? I just keep going, right? And I always believed that I could do it. I think that's the biggest mindset.
There you go. Absolutely.
Right. And maybe that's a big part of why I think I'm at this stage of trying to figure out what's next and where am I at, right? Because for the first time in my life, there's more vulnerability that comes into what are you doing, right? And what I mean by that is you and I joked all the time about the apex. There's
Right.
alphas and there's betas and then every once in a while there's an apex. I feel like an apex. Alphas.
Yeah, for those that are watching and they don't really know what that is.
Right.
If you can.
Well, just the best animal in nature that if you're going to describe it with an animal is like a silverback gorilla, right?
Okay.
That's an apex. There's nothing that competes with them other than themselves, right?
Okay.
And other than maybe man, right? What I mean by that is, and alphas are always competing with each other.
Yes. Okay.
Apexes are only competing with themselves.
Okay.
Right?
I can relate to that.
Right? I'm not a person who gets jealous, right? Because I'm not competing with somebody else. I'm competing with myself, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense.
Business-wise too. And part of it I think has to do with being in service, being okay in athletics.
So yeah, let's talk about that. So at some point you, and I can't remember let me look because you've done so many things. I want to make sure I get it in the right order.
Oh God.
Because, well, you joined the Army when you were 18.
Yep.
Okay.
Get away from home.
That was it.
That was it.
Like, I just want to get away.
Yep.
And I mean, you didn't go in at it lightly, did you?
No.
You took on some big tasks.
At the time, the coolest thing I thought the Army had was being a tanker, like the big tanks that you're seeing, unfortunately, we're seeing on TV in Kosovo, right?
Right.
And Ukraine. And at the time, it was actually considered like one of their more elite battlefield type, fighting forces, right? Because you had to be able to be smart enough to understand the computers, to run the cannon and all this.
So yet again,
stuff,
you're
right?
that position in football.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Right. And the big bad tanker, and everybody else is just a speed bump. You know what I mean? Was that
like literally.
right? And then I did that, and and the military was very natural for me.
Okay.
Because ADD and dyslexia didn't fit in, because they say, hey, you got to do this. And I was, whether I wanted to be, just like in sports, just like working when I was younger, I was always that person who ended up being the manager.
Gotcha.
Working.
So you just
ended
had
up being the captain, ended up being the getting, in charge of this or in charge of that, not because I wanted it. Honest to God's truth, I was too lazy to strive to be that, right? And yet, without knowing it, I always ended up, being in those positions of command.
Now,
or
was
whatever.
that, do you feel like that's just something was innate in you, that you just
Yeah.
had that natural
I
leadership
think a
thing?
part of it's that being 12 years old and being in charge of the family.
Right.
Right?
And
You step up where nobody else does.
it's
right?
interesting you say all this, because it really touches heartstrings for me, because, I lost one of my parents to suicide when I was 10.
Mm-hmm.
And that took a traumatic toll, as you can imagine, on our
Absolutely.
family. And as a result, I'm the oldest as well. And my mother was very, very depressed after that. And so, I was kind of left to be the one in charge of my siblings.
Right.
And I left home actually when I was 16.
Right.
Because I was pregnant, and I didn't want my mother to have the burden of the responsibility. Plus, I felt like I needed to be on my own and have my son in a different environment. With no disrespect to my mother, it just was what it was at that time. Right. But always finding myself, because I had to be the rock quite often.
Right.
That I found myself in leadership roles or doing leadership type things without even necessarily seeking the roles. But I do find now, and we'll get to this, and maybe you can relate. Well, you might not be able to relate because you've been in those leadership roles, but now I actually seek it in a different way.
Oh, I believe that.
Okay.
Yeah. Once you start owning companies too, then not owning it is really hard.
That's interesting.
I don't know if I could be an employee right now. I honestly don't know. I think I'd be a valuable employee. I'd probably work my ass off if you wanted me to and I wanted to, but I don't think I'd be not the typical employee, right? I mean, once you start thinking in an ownership mindset, because to me, I think everybody should think like an owner. Everybody. If you want success in this earth, you need to think like you're an owner. That was one of the only things I thought was valuable out of that rich dad, poor dad crap.
How did you thought it was crap?
I thought there was a lot of stuff that was just regurgitated in a really nice, fancy package.
Okay. Well, speak your mind, Mike. But let me ask you that then, because I think there's a lot of value in your story.
Right.
What or how did you get to the point of being, from thinking like an owner, having a mindset of an owner, because it was in you innately, it seems, to actually physically becoming one? What was that transition? Like, how did you get there?
For me, the key has always been to just keep risking it all.
Interesting.
Not being afraid to risk it all, right? And for me, it was probably a very easy thing to do.
And why is that?
There's been lots of studies about people that are ADD and have other learning disabilities, that the ones that become successful, the thing that's different amongst them than the people that are not, and why they're actually a higher percentage in our population of people with learning disabilities that head Fortune 500 companies. People don't realize that found companies and head Fortune 500 companies, and they're normally in society, right? I think dyslexia is like, I don't know, 15, 16% of the population. But when you get into very successful people, it's like 20%.
Oh, wow.
Right? 30%. ADD, ADHD, way higher percentage within people that are successful versus people that just don't have
And why do you think that is, from a personal perspective?
Well, from personal, I think actually goes along with what the studies are saying. I think you learn to take risks, to come up with different coping mechanisms to hide whatever's wrong with you, because you don't realize what's wrong with you, right? It's kind of like they always say, people that are deaf have unbelievable eyesight or other senses.
So you gain another sense, right?
You gain additional senses. And I think that's very true. I think that's very normal amongst people. I have a really weird ability to read people. I tell a story about how bad of a poker or a gambler I am unless I don't look at my cards. If I do not look at my cards, I can win.
Okay.
I just watch people at the table.
Gotcha.
And without even looking for keys, because I've never read a book on it or anything, but I can just sit there and pick up. But the second I look at my cards, I lose.
It's interesting that you're...
Because they can tell from me too, you know what I mean? I can't hide it.
It's interesting you talk about this ADD thing, because recently I had a really great friend of mine. She just recently wrote a book, and she was on the show recently. And she's a psychologist and a therapist and worked with children for many years. And we were having dinner one day, and she's got a very calm demeanor about her. And we were having dinner, and she kind of like a little soft laugh, and she says, "Do you have ADD?" And no one had ever asked me
Right.
that question before. And I said, I don't think so. She's like, I don't hope you don't take it the wrong way.
You
But
probably have a little bit, huh?
she's like, you're kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to myself, well, I've always been all over the place, but I just thought that that was
Normal.
normal.
Right.
You know, it's not necessarily like squirrel,
Right.
but I do find that easily, like if I'm talking to you and something else is going on over there or something, I need, like I get very easily distracted, but I do find myself sometimes spreading myself so thin.
Right.
Where I'm in this business endeavor, or I'm trying this career,
Right.
or I'm doing that, or I'm doing that. And when I read your bio, I was like, wow, like this is the same trajectory I'm going with, not nearly as much success. So I need to hone it in somehow. So, okay, so to take it back just a little bit, you said you owned a cafe.
Mm-hmm.
At some point after you got out of the military, you became a police officer.
Yeah, after I sold the cafe,
Okay.
I went back to school, and it was just a weird story. I used to have a lot of cops that came in and sat in the restaurant, and they knew that the partnership with my cafe was breaking up, and they were regulars, and a couple guys were like, "Hey, why don't you come do a ride along?" And I went along. I'm like, "Oh, this would be kind of cool to go do for another job," not thinking that this is what I should do. And next thing I knew, I was back in school and got a degree in, or at least enough credits to get the law enforcement stuff done and qualify and go to the police academy and became a cop.
And again, you're a go big or go home. You're that guy in that football team.
I'm that guy.
You were going through the walls. You didn't say, I'm
Yep.
just going to be a police officer patrolling the road. I'm going to go hardcore narcotics.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, I lied through my teeth and said I'd never smoked weed, when they interviewed me, and, never partied hard at all. But that being that person that can read people worked in my favor, right? I learned pretty quick. I had my first couple months on the job, I was a patrolman in an area where I had to literally fight every night. And it sucked after a while. It just
You think?
sucks.
Yeah.
Right? And then I get selected for this task force, and we're knocking down doors and we're doing undercover stuff nonstop. And we're looking for, people that are doing horrific things. And it wasn't just for narcotics, but, we used to take a lot of bad guys down doing lots for other stuff, but the easiest way to arrest them was on their drug trafficking.
Gotcha.
Right. So it wasn't focused on the drug traffickers. It was, okay, this guy's a child porn guy, but we can arrest him on dealing his coke. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Right.
Gotcha.
Or this guy's running guns, or this guy's killing people, or whatever, all the violent crime stuff that they couldn't get cases on. That's what we did. Well, unfortunately, my job was to go hang out with those guys, get to know them.
Wow.
And figure out who the guy was in the chain that was ordering the violence. And then we would figure out a way to arrest that guy. So, here I'm a cop, and your job is to go hang out at a bar, God forbid, right?
Right,
Go
right.
party at some guy's mansion for the weekend. I mean, it was an interesting time of my life, right?
Mhm.
It also makes it very difficult to have relationships normal ever after that. I mean, it really does screw with your psyche and what the world's like. You end up seeing shit you shouldn't see. I thought it was bad seeing shit in the service, but that one, there were
Different level, huh?
Yeah, because if anybody in the task force had any cases whatsoever that were related to any kind of violent crime, we got called in. So you're a part of every violent crime that would happen.
Again, I don't mean to interject, but your stories are so interesting to me, but it's so very familiar to myself because I was an EMT for 10 years.
Exactly.
And so I'm here, when people see me now, they see me either as a realtor or they see me in this corporate world in the casinos dressed up. But I also was simultaneously at times doing both jobs where I was, geared up on an ambulance and compressions and seeing, gruesome,
you feel like
horrific.
Superman, don't you? 1 second you're Lois Lane, and
Clark Kent, and the
next thing you're in this superhero
But
outfit.
what happens is, to your point, is there was so much in such a small time frame and at such a young age in my life that I was being exposed to from being in Dubai and having dinners with sheiks one day, and then the next day, a triple homicide with children involved.
Right.
And so sometimes my personality and the dynamics that have led me to who the person I am today, a lot of people can't relate to because some of that does create some PTSD because you do see things
I don't care what anybody says.
that
Everybody
is
has
not
PTSD.
normal for people to see. And so
Right.
you shut it off because you have to be a professional, do your job.
Right.
But it resonates after a while, and you kind of become emotionally disconnected to people that you're close to, and you compartmentalize, and it just,
So there, you just nailed it right there. I think for most people, we wear our PTSD on our sleeve, right? And it's something that's a part of you, and you deal with it over time. I've got friends that are dealing with it in unbelievable ways, right? Have unbelievable problems, some of them, right? Some of my service buddies, still dealing with it, right? But yet, then other people, it doesn't affect them at all. Why is that, right? What is it that's going on in their head? It doesn't affect them. I think if you're an empathetic person going into one of those jobs, which makes the very best, first responders there are people that are empathetic to begin with, the ones that are there for the right reason. They're also the ones that are going to be traumatized the most
right. I
by
agree with
those
that
jobs, right?
wholeheartedly.
And then I'm a compartmentalizer. I mean, you know that. You've listened to my story a couple of times.
And I am too, so I relate to it a lot. It's nice to talk to someone.
I mean, when I'm with my kids, it's about my kids. And
right.
when I'm at business, it's about business. And and everything I do in my life, it's in little blocks. And unfortunately, I trained myself to do that. That was not.
Do you feel like that has been a help or hindrance?
I think it kept you from eating a gun at one point. I think it destroyed a lot of my relationships, friends, and marriages.
Personal,
I think it absolutely helped me in other ways, right? So it's both. When it comes to business, it's great.
Interesting,
right?
So I want to tap into that because and you, if you don't mind, I would love for you to come back because we've got there's so much we could literally have like I can make this a 3-part series just with talking to you, honestly.
I'd love to.
But you got a real estate license.
Yep. Gave real estate a try.
Yeah, here you are, officer, narcotics, all this stuff, crazy stuff. Now you're a realtor for a short period of time because you went right from realtor to a broker and an owner really quickly.
Right.
And at some point you adopted Signature, which is a really big company. I've been to many of your functions actually.
Right.
Your company's functions, and I must tell you, it's ran very well, and the people are great.
It's not me. It's the people that work there.
But it's
at all.
Of course, and I get that, and I 100% I get that.
But that's, you were asking me before, what are some of my secrets to success, right? So with my style, I have always needed that yin to my yang, right?
Okay. And what does that mean?
Meaning, well, you've met my business partner, Brandon. Brandon and I couldn't be more different if we tried.
That is true, actually.
Physically looking, I take it back. We're both kind of there at the moment. In certain
so funny.
Brandon's is quiet. He's methodical, right? Deep thinker before he makes decisions, right? He's a builder, right? He builds every day, right? I'm the big idea guy, right? Too many big ideas for our company at times, right? In the past. I'm the money guy, right? At the beginning, not now, but I mean, at the beginning, I was the one who went out and found us money when we needed to find money, whether it was my own or somebody else, right? I'm not good. I know I'm not good because of the ADD and other things and just my style. If you say, hey, I need you to take care of this, and this by Friday, there's a good chance it's not going to get done.
So it's about finding the right partnership.
Right. Yeah. Or assistance, right? I mean, the most money I ever made in my entire career, I literally had 3 personal assistants, and it looked like that stupid Elon Musk, video where he's got all those people following him around the factory, telling him what he's got in the next 5 minutes, right? And they figured out really fast, and they told me about this later, that they made more money if they never let me out of their sight. Right. And so they would ride in the truck with me to appointments. If they had to split off and go take another client for us, they would. But it was like one was taking notes and one was telling me who was the next person to call. It was just like rolled. Right. And we all made ridiculous money that year. And finding people like that in your life other aspects of your life that can be your yin to your yang, to fill the void that you're not, is absolutely a key, I think.
Mm.
But the problem is my personality drives those kind of people crazy.
Right. I
Right?
can relate to that as well. Just so you know, I can totally relate.
You know what I mean?
So now we get down to the question.
Yep.
Why do you feel that you need something next? And I know that's maybe sounds like a silly question, but it's something that you're asking yourself now, that what's this next part of my life?
Well,
And what is the complexity to that for you?
for me, it's a couple things. One, I felt vulnerable for the first time. I had some health issues. We all get them eventually, right? It's going to happen.
Right.
COVID kicked my ass. I got really, really sick. I had a surgery before that. Didn't go well. Lost a ton of muscle, gained a ton of fat, was just feeling horrible, right? At the same time, a lot of my duties with the company were no longer there. I'm still more the investor stage now, owner, right? Now what do I, so of course I'm the kind of guy who's sitting there up in Alaska in the cold and the dark this winter, and I'm climbing the walls. You can only watch so much Netflix.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Especially someone who's
Right.
busybody. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm at that stage, and when you hit, for some people it's 40, for some people it's 50, some people it's 60, whatever. For some people it's when they retire from their whatever 9 to 5, right? They have to come up with something else. So it's either that or you sit on the couch and wait to die. I can't sit on the couch and wait to die. That's not going to happen. That's not who I am. So, and I think it's also that silverback thing, like concept, right? All my life, I've always been either the biggest or the most powerful or the smartest person in the room. Not as an arrogance statement. You just had confidence that that's who you were when you were in the room. And maybe that's why I project that at times too. As you get older, you start realizing there are smarter people in this room than me. And there's definitely people that are stronger than me because I'm not as strong as I used to be. You know what I mean?
Right.
And your body starts to break down and things like that. So you get to a certain point where you're just like, I'm still trying to hang on to who I was and your mojo. And all of that is in your psyche when you hit 50 for men, I think, more than women. I think women, you hit your stride when you're in your 40s.
I don't know.
Oh,
But-
there's nothing sexier than a powerful woman in their 40s.
Well, we'll have to talk about it on a different show. That's
No,
for
but
sure.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
It's just, there's just something about some women who they hit they know who they are,
Yeah.
or at least they think they do. That's the key part, right?
Right.
Men, I think we get to a point where it's like, shit, are we still valuable anymore?
Interesting.
Right?
Very interesting.
What are we going to do? For guys that need to fill their time, right, with something, whether it's an entrepreneur, I'm literally looking at, do I want to build fishing rods? Do I want to go into doing mediation? Do I want to coach more? Do I want to coach investing? Do I, say, throw it all to the wind and go down to Costa Rica and
just relax,
run a boat,
Yeah.
And fish all day long?
Well, I would love to.
That's where I'm at,
I would love to make this a part 2, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
For the sake of time, because I really want you to share that more in depth.
Yeah.
And I want you to feel, I don't want to cut it off, because I really feel like this would be a great segue into
Sure.
to the second part. So we're actually going to leave it there and have Mike come back to elaborate more on part 2 of this. I'm inviting you back. I did this to you on purpose.
I know you did.
Yeah, because I want you to come back.
For you, anything.
So I want to tell you, thank you. For those of you that have been watching, there is going to be the continuation of this interview. So this is part 1. I would love for you to tune in and see part 2, where we really tap into that question. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
For being on the show, and I'll see you in part 2.
Okay.
All right. And for those of you out there, thank you again for watching. We'll see you for the next episode on the Mindset of Success. Ciao.